Okay, Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa mawala amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So inshallah, in this standalone presentation, we're going to shift a little gears, and instead of continuing with teaching the Arabic language, what we'll do is we'll do a little root cause analysis. Because when you gain a new perspective on the problems and the struggles and the frustrations that you're experiencing, then a couple of things happen. First of all, you have a huge weight that's lifted off your shoulders. Because I've done this in the past with other areas of my life, and just by putting them on paper, all the negative effects, the negative things that I'm experiencing in an area of my life, just by getting them down in one place, it feels as if a 20-pound weight was removed from my shoulders. So I think by the end of this presentation, you're going to feel the same. Okay, you're going to feel that this huge weight has just been lifted off your shoulders. And when you gain this new perspective, and you realize that all these things that you were previously considering the problems are actually symptoms, and there's a much deeper core problem, that if you fix that core problem, everything will just change. All of these undesirable effects will transform into their opposites. Then now it's a lot more easier to come up with an action plan that you could be reasonably confident that will work and will get you to where you need to be. Okay, and we've been doing this for well over 10 years now, and there's been 200,000 plus people that have joined our mailing list over the years, and many of them have watched the videos, and they've read the report, and they've communicated with us in the comments, and also thousands of them have gone on to become students of the program formally, and we take surveys from the students, and we ask them what were their challenges, and these are the very things that people have highlighted in survey responses. So what I've done is I've taken the most prominent of the negative effects that people have told us that these are the things that they've been experiencing, and we put them on the map, and we've asked the question why. Okay, why does this happen? And we've determined a cause for that, and then asked the same question for that cause, and then come up with a deeper cause. And as you do this, what you'll notice is that more and more effects will begin tracing back to fewer and fewer causes. So the causes start converging. And this is how we arrive at the root cause, or what we call the core problem. Once you identify the core problem, then it becomes 100 times easier to come up with a solution. Okay? So with that said, let's go ahead and let's assess the current reality. Once we're done with this, then we'll immediately proceed to the action plan, which would be the future reality tree. Okay? So people have told us that, what they see is that they have lots of Arabic books on the shelf gathering dust. So that's a negative effect. Okay, because when you see the books and you're not able to study them, and you've tried and you've failed and you've given up, then you feel like you're a quitter. So you start questioning your own work ethic and determination. So it leads to this low self-esteem, and you feel that you're a poor learner, right? And then you get this sense that the language is difficult and you're just not cut out for it, or it's just somewhat impossible to master. Okay, so you get these feelings, and this is because you give up. But then while you're giving up, you're also trying new approaches. So there's this willingness to try many approaches, and that's because there's a hope in Allah that there is an easier way. Okay, so with that hope, you try again, and then you give up, and then you have that hope, so you try again. So when you couple the giving up with the willingness to try many approaches, then both of these together lead to a bunch of Arabic books on the shelf gathering dust. Okay, on the other hand, we have cancelled classes, which is another major negative effect that people have told us. That they enroll in a program with a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of hope, and then what happens is the classes cancel out. Okay, they get to a certain level, and before they can move to the next level, the classes end up canceling. Why does that happen? That happens because of dwindling attendance. So now when you couple the canceling of the classes with the fact that there's a lack of established programs out there where students can merge in based on their current level, then both of these factors together, the cancelling of the classes and the lack of established programs, lead to people having to restart the basics again and again, to the point that most people have lost count of how many times they've had to restart the alphabet. And that, again, is not a good feeling, because if you know a certain topic well, then you don't want to relearn it again and again. Like, you got to move on to the next topic. But because there's no established program out there where they can do that, then they're forced to relearn what they already know. Right? Why does that happen? Why do classes cancel out? Because of dwindling attendance. So you see? So on this side, we have giving up. Okay, why do people give up? Because they get overwhelmed after just a few pages. And then when they give up, and they move to the next series of textbooks, and then the same thing happens there, then this leads to a bunch of Arabic books on the shelf gathering dust. So here we've identified three causes for overwhelm. Okay, the first is confusing terminology, because they're told about rafa, nasab, and jar, and they're told about pronouns, and they're told about subject and object and possessive and all of these terms, and they're confusing. The terms are confusing, and there's so many of them, and they're learning words. They're learning. They're being given long list of vocabulary, endless list of vocabulary, and they're being told to memorize these words, and they don't really know how the words fit together. And there's a fear of forgetting all of the rules. So when these three factors combine together, or any one of them on their own, it leads to overwhelm. It leads to the student getting overwhelmed after just a few pages, which then leads to giving up, which leads to a bunch of books on the shelf gathering dust. So here we have dwindling attendance. And the reason why people quit their courses is because they lose their enthusiasm for the study. Okay, now, what leads to students losing their enthusiasm for the study? So it happens because of a number of reasons. First of all, there's a lot of time wasted on conversational elements like airports and hotels. And then there's a bunch of vocabulary that's being taught that seems completely irrelevant to their primary objective, which is to understand the Quran. Because when most people say, I want to learn Arabic, what they really mean is I want to understand the Quran. But yet, they're being taught this vocabulary that has nothing to do with understanding the Quran, and the courses are just inherently boring and they're ineffective. Okay, so all three of those together, and also the fact that there's no theory being brought to life, and there's no actual Arabic book being read. Okay, so all of this together then leads to the student losing their enthusiasm for the study. Okay, and most of these, the wasted time on conversational elements and the irrelevant vocabulary and the inherent boringness and ineffectiveness of the courses is because the teaching method doesn't respect the needs of the student. Okay? And it's also because there's no big picture given up front that would allow one to begin reading an actual Arabic book as soon as possible. So they're being taught theory, and then there's no opportunity given to implement the theory. And then before an opportunity is given, more theory is taught. And then even more theory is taught. So the course becomes boring and it's ineffective. And since there's no book, where the teacher can highlight the theory, and the student is not given an opportunity to see the implementation of the theory, then what that does is that it leads to confusing terminology, right? So Arabic is taught as if it's a disconnected series of rules and words, and there's no overall framework being provided at the beginning. So both of these two factors together, the fact that it's taught as a disconnected series of rules and words, and that there's no book where the theory could be brought to life, both of these two together lead to confusing terminology, and they also lead to this fear of forgetting all the rules, and the fact that it's disconnected series of rules and words also leads to learning lots of words without knowing how they fit together. And then this one here in particular, the fact that Arabic is taught as if it's a disconnected series of rules and words, leads to this one at the very top. In other words, students feel Arabic is a difficult language. Okay, so now we're down to only two. On the one hand, we have a teaching method that does not respect the needs of the student, and this is the reason why a lot of time is being wasted on conversational elements like airports and hotels, and it's also the reason why the vocabulary that's taught is irrelevant, and all of these things. And there's no overall framework of how the language works. So why are these two? What's the cause behind these two? It's because the teachers and or the courses and or the textbooks, they're incapable of quickly getting to the guts of how the language works. Okay, in the opening days of class. So if you fix this one here, then what will happen is these two would automatically change. Okay, and like the vast majority of what we're seeing on this map would transform into their opposites, and I'm going to show you exactly how that's done. So this map, we went from the top and we took the effects that we're currently experiencing, and we tried to trace those effects back to their causes in order to ultimately arrive at a root cause. The next map is going to be a future reality tree, and we won't start from the top, but instead we'll start from the bottom. Okay? So now we have a new map here, where instead of starting from the top, we're starting from the bottom, and we're focusing on those new elements that we need to inject into the current reality. An injection is something that's not currently there, and you need to do it. So it's an action item, like a verb. So once you do these, then on the previous map, the undesirable effects will transform into their opposites. So we'll show you how that's done. So first of all, you need to lead with explaining how the majority of meanings in Arabic do not come from words, but instead they come from the vowels and patterns. So this needs to be ingrained in the mind of the student, that Arabic is unlike other languages. In other languages, words give meaning. In Arabic also, words give meaning. Okay, but unlike every other language on the planet, in Arabic, the majority of meanings do not come from words. So you have the letters giving you one meaning, and then you have the vowels giving you more than what the letters give you. And then when you combine the words together, the structure gives you even more. So you can have a sentence with 5 words in it, and the total number of meanings that you'll be getting will be much more than 5, more like 13, 14, 15. And we're teaching you all of this separately in the 4 series of videos. Okay, some of it was taught in the previous one, and more will come in the upcoming videos. So that needs to be done. So the comprehensiveness of the language needs to be ingrained in the mind of the student. If you do that, then what happens is the student is exposed to the aspects that truly make Arabic the most superior language on the planet, and this creates a strong emotional connection to the studies. Okay, strong emotional connection to the studies is created. Okay, so on the one hand, you need to teach the comprehensiveness and explain how Arabic, the majority of meanings, they don't come from words, but instead they come from vowels and patterns, and how that's done. And then you'd have to isolate from the language a core and a central theme focusing on these non-word meanings, and teach that first. If you do both of these, if you lead with explaining the comprehensiveness, and at the same time you isolate the core, the 4% of the language that gives you over half of all of your benefits, and you teach that first, then what will happen is that you'll have a teaching method that fully respects the needs of the student. And now you won't have that problem with irrelevant vocabulary, and you won't have that problem of a lot of time being wasted on conversational elements like hotels and airports, and all of those, what we saw in the previous map. They'll disappear, and instead you'll have a teaching method that fully respects the needs of the student. Okay, once you've done this, once you've explained the comprehensiveness, and once you've isolated from the language a core and a central theme focusing on the non-word meanings, then now what you can do is you can get the students reading an actual Arabic book by the 3rd week of class. And the minute the book begins, so you start the book, and coupled with the fact that the emotional connection has already been created because you fascinated them with the mechanism. You see, so the whole point here is to create fascination and to create an interest and a strong enthusiasm, right? And this strong emotional connection by exposing the student to the aspects that truly make Arabic the most superior language on the planet. Once you've done this, that the strong emotional connection has been created, and you begin the book at the most optimal time, which is the 3rd week of class. You do these 2, and then the 2 would combine together, and the enthusiasm level of the student would go through the roof. So the minute the book begins, the enthusiasm level of the student goes through the roof. Why? Because they no longer have to wait for a payoff. All of that theory that was taught earlier now comes to life. And it says that the core theory taught at the beginning comes to life. You begin the book, now every example, every word, every phrase, and every sentence in the book becomes an example of what was taught earlier. So this is exactly what it means for the theory to come to life. And all of the gaps in understanding are quickly filled, and the core theory is solidified. So there's some elements of grammar that are taught at the very beginning, before the book begins, and then the book begins, and then more grammar is taught later, right? So when the book begins, 2 things happen. First of all, here, the enthusiasm level of the student goes through the roof. The next thing that happens is the gaps in understanding, which were left when we were teaching the theory at the beginning, because we were going rather quickly. So we were not aiming for a 100% understanding, but instead we were just trying to gain a big picture. So there were some gaps that were left there. Those gaps are now filled. And the theory that was taught earlier is solidified, and the student now knows it very well. Okay, so what you can do at that stage is you can teach the rest, the next most broadly applicable aspects of the language based on need and necessity. You see, so the author in the book is bringing more and more elaborate structures. So as the author introduces the new structures in the book, we're able to talk about them. And we can teach new grammar without overwhelming the student. And that's the whole point. Okay? And the vocabulary builds organically because you're gaining the words through the medium of a story. Okay, so this way, instead of using flashcards or using vocabulary lists, you're gaining the vocabulary that's occurring in the book, and it's all happening naturally. It's all happening organically, and it's happening effortlessly. And we then lay the focus on the morphology, on the patterns. So now, when you're learning vocabulary, you're not just learning words, but instead, with every new word learned, the student is actually learning entire families of words. You see that? So this is how the progress is accelerated, okay, by laying the emphasis on the verb patterns. Okay. Yeah, so we have a teaching method that fully respects the needs of the student, and coupled with the fact that we started a book, okay, in the third week of class, these two together would lead to all vocabulary remains relevant to the needs of the student. Okay, because the book is obviously a classical Arabic book, and the vocabulary there is vocabulary from the Quran, directly from the Quran. Okay, now when we take the fact that we're teaching the next most broadly applicable aspects of the language based on need and necessity through the structures that are occurring in the book, coupled with the fact that the enthusiasm level of the student has gone through the roof, then what happens is, with every new major discussion in grammar, the student starts experiencing aha moments and epiphanies, because they have an overall framework to tie all of those rules to, so they can see how this rule fits in, and they can see how that rule fits in. So it doesn't overwhelm, but instead it excites the student even more. You see? And because we're teaching the rest of the language based on need and necessity, and the gaps in understanding have already been filled. So there was the dense theory taught at the beginning, and now the gaps are being filled, and all of that theory is solidifying, then what happens is the student no longer is overwhelmed by too many rules. They don't seem random. The rules don't seem random because they're all interconnected, and they're all layers of the system. You see, remember the onion analogy? It's like peeling the layers off an onion. So with every new layer that's peeled, the student gets even more excited, and their understanding gets even more clear, and they get this unstoppable momentum. Okay, so we have all of the vocabulary that's being learned. It's relevant to the needs of the student, and then with every new word, the student is not learning one word, but instead they're actually learning entire families of words, and they're not getting overwhelmed, and they're getting frequent aha moments, and they're getting epiphanies. So when you combine all four of these together, then what happens is that you get an unstoppable momentum. The momentum is created. So now the student is like 20 times more likely to succeed than at the very beginning. So it's a front-loaded method where the student at the beginning, there's considerable effort involved, but you get past the week 3 mark, and you allow the book to start, then what happens is the chances of success dramatically increase, like multiply. Okay, so once you have this unstoppable momentum, you can now begin your first unvoweled text. Okay, and this takes about 6 months. So you're reading a children's level book for about 6 months, and you're getting a very good understanding of grammar, and you're exhausting the whole area of sarf. Okay, this area here. You place extra emphasis on the morphology in the initial months, because then that couples with the fact that the vocabulary builds organically and effortlessly, and then it leads to this every word being learned is an entire, because you know the patterns. You know that the meanings that are coming from the pattern, that's what sarf is all about, right? You see? So then once the momentum has been created, then you can begin your first classical text, unvoweled. Okay, the book does not have the vowels in them. And this is the stage where the student generally becomes extremely passionate about the studies. Like one brother, Sayyid Idris from Toronto, he said that, I'm now at a stage in my Arabic studies where I attach more importance and more passion to them. I'm more passionate about my Arabic studies, and I attach more importance to them than I do to my master's degree, right? Okay, so once you have this unstoppable momentum and you've started your first Arabic book, classical, without vowels, then the student now develops deciphering capabilities and can now read without vowels with conscious effort. So you're not there yet, but you're getting there. So once you have the deciphering capabilities, then you can begin tafsir of the Quran. And over here we'd be covering 2 large surahs from the Quran, and with grammatical analysis, but more importantly we'll be highlighting the balagha benefits, the rhetorical devices, because grammar teaches you how to grammar teaches you flexibility, that you can take a verb and 2 nouns and you can arrange it in multiple ways. because the sequence does not determine the grammar. So you have one of the two nouns is the subject, the other noun is the object, and you can arrange it in multiple ways. So from all of those ways that the words can be arranged, one of them would be standard. So everything else being equal, that's the one you would use. But then you have many more unconventional methods of arrangement. So what do you do with those? So the science of balagha, rhetoric, will tell you when and where to use which structure from the unconventional structures. So when the Quran uses the most appropriate structure at each and every occasion, then this is what gets noticed. And this is what dumbfounded the pre-Islamic Arab. Right? Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Hud, أَفَمَنْ كَانَ عَلَى بَيِّنَةٍ مِّن رَبِّهِ وَيَتْلُوهُ شَاهِدٌ مِّنْهُ. Can the rejecter of the Quran ever be equal to the one who is upon evidence from his Lord, and to it is attached its own internal witness? So it's the special use of the language within the Quran that makes it miraculous. Okay, so you're exposed to that. And when the tafsir started at this stage, when the student has already developed deciphering capabilities and can now read without vowels, then we're able to draw from the works of the scholars, the classical texts. Imam al-Alusi's tafsir, which is Ruh al-Ma'ani, and the tafsir of Abu Sa'ud, which is Irshad al-Aql al-Salim. And these are not easy books. I mean, they're quite challenging. These books are quite challenging. And when you're able to understand the words of the scholar, how they express the meaning, and how they expound on the beauty of the Quran, then what happens is the student is now exposed to the most wondrous aspects of Quranic eloquence. You see, and beginning the tafsir and more specifically reading from the works of the scholars like Al-Alusi and Abu Sa'ud, what that does is it trains the student to think at the level of the scholars. And at this stage, we would introduce a couple of texts from Imam al-Ghazali in classical logic. And Imam al-Ghazali was a brilliant author, and he was an absolute master at creating mental imagery. And there's considerable value in his prose, in his highly elevated prose, his writing style. So you read a couple of books from him, and you're also exposed to Imam al-Alusi and Abu Sa'ud, and you're doing tafsir of the Quran, and your attention is being drawn to the rhetorical devices that are being used in the verses. Then what happens is now you're trained to think at the level of the scholars. So now when you combine all of this together, the fact that the student is already capable of reading without vowels, with some conscious effort, and then you've started your tafsir and you're drawing their attention to the most wondrous aspects of Quranic eloquence, then these two together lead to the interest level of the student reaches a new high. Okay? At that point, you can start your second book in grammar, which is the commentary of Ibn Aqil on the Alfiya of Ibn Malik, which is a book in grammar. And it's different than the previous one because the previous one was cryptic and it was challenging. Okay, this one is much more expansive and it's quite easy. So when you read a quarter of the Alfiya, 250 couplets from the 1,000, then what happens is now the student can now read unvoweled Arabic as easily as they read English. So on the one hand, they can do this, they can read Arabic as easily, like fluency. Now you have fluency because earlier it was with conscious effort, and now it's fluent. And on the other side, you have the student is trained to think at the level of scholars. So now you can introduce Imam al-Taftazani's 550-page book, commentary on Al-Qazwini's Talkhis al-Miftah, which is the book in Balagha. Rhetoric. It's the most advanced area, and it's the most noble area of the language. And this particular text is challenging. I mean, this is the book that the scholars and the madrasa, they shiver when they hear the name of the book. You see, when I was studying, when I was in my early years of the alim course, the madrasa I was in, the teacher who was teaching this, Mukhtasar al-Ma'ani, the name of the book is Mukhtasar al-Ma'ani, he left, the institute, and he established his own institute, and that book was vacant for 3 months. They couldn't find a teacher. And I kid you not, they couldn't find a teacher to teach his book for 3 months, because it was so challenging. So now you're at a level where you can study this. And when you study this, then what happens is now you've achieved your goal and you have a firm grounding in all areas of classical Arabic. It's been attained. So let's go back and let's look at the boxes which are in orange. So the action items here are the ones that are in orange. The rest of them will happen automatically. And this is what I need you to understand. Like, you don't have to do each. This is not a to-do list. This is not a to-do list. Like, you're going to see so many entities on this map, but you don't have to do them all. You just have to do the ones in orange. If you do the ones in orange, then the ones in green will happen automatically, and that's the beauty of it. So hopefully you can see that, right? So from all of these boxes, these bottom two we're doing for you already. Okay, this is the whole purpose of the series of 4 videos and the 45-page report, is to explain to you how the majority of the meanings in Arabic do not come from the words, but instead they come from the vowels and patterns. So we've done some of it already in the first video, and there's much more to come in the second, third, and fourth videos. Okay? And then to isolate from the language a core, the 4% of the language that gives you over half of all of your benefits taught up front. So this too we're doing for you. So this bottom 2 boxes are taken care of. Now you're going to need to start a book. Okay, now how are you going to start a book? You can start a book, but who's going to draw your attention to the theory that was taught earlier? And who's going to introduce the new theory? Okay, teach the next most broadly applicable aspects of the language based on the structures occurring in the book. Obviously, right? And then you have to lay the emphasis on the sarf and teach the science of morphology, which is somewhat self-contained. The rules of morphology are self-contained, and they're not that many. There's a handful, or at most a dozen or 15 or 20 maximum amount of rules, self-contained, that if you know them, you're able to identify every possible verb. So if there's 150,000 verbs out there, you will be able to identify them all. So that's what morphology is. And this is a science that Imam Nawawi was studying at a time when he was studying Sahih Muslim. You see, it comes in his biography that he used to split up his day into 12 portions, and he was studying 12 sciences, and from amongst those 12 sciences was the science of sarf, wa darsan fit tasrif. So he doesn't consider himself relieved from this area, right? So this would be over a number of months. You'd be studying sarf and you'd exhaust it and you'd master it, and grammar is still being taught. So basically it's unbalanced in the sense that there's more emphasis on the sarf and the grammar is being taught concurrently based on need and necessity. Okay? Right. So the next item would be this, to introduce the grammar text, the 132-page best book in the world for grammar, which I've taught well over 22 times. Every time I teach it, I gain a newer perspective, I gain new insights, and my understanding of the text increases, and I get more energetic, and the tone of my voice changes. And the students, they notice this from me, and they really love that intensity in my voice. So you're going to need to study a book. It doesn't have to necessarily be this one, but it would need to be a book at the level of the Hidayatul Nahu. 132 pages from cover to cover. So that would revisit all of the topics that were taught earlier in the first 6 months, and in much greater detail. And it will fill further gaps in understanding. And then there's the introduction of the tafsir, and then there's the 2 texts from Imam al-Ghazali, and then there's the commentary of Ibn Aqil on the Alfiya of Ibn Malik, and ultimately it's the first 100 pages from the 550-page monstrosity, the Taftazani's book, Mukhtasar al-Ma'ani, the book that the scholars shiver when they hear the name of the book. Okay, so now you got a couple of choices. We're giving you the bottom 2. Okay, the rest of them you can try and scour through the volumes and look for hints and clues and try to achieve them on your own. But I don't see how you're going to be able to do many of them. Okay, so you're going to have to sign up for this program. Okay, so if you look under this video, your email address will probably be pre-populated in that box. If it's not there, you can type your email address and you can get on the early bird list, because we will be opening up registration very soon for the main program. And if you want to jump ahead of the line, and if you want to join the program before anyone else, then I strongly suggest that you get on the early bird list. And then in the meantime, we'll be sharing with you the second, third, and fourth videos, and then you'll have more time to really assess whether this is right for you. And if it's not, no problem, you'll still get great value. Okay, because we have much more to share with you. With all of that said, I look forward to speaking with you soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.